They sit across the world, quiet and still, stones so huge that just seeing them is hard to explain. Some weigh as much as passenger airplanes, others locked together with gaps smaller than a human hair. They stand on mountain tops, deep in valleys, hidden under jungles, and spread across deserts. No matter where they are found, they share one thing. They do not fit the simple story we have been told about human history. History says that organized life began in Mesopotamia and Egypt, that our ancestors slowly learned to farm, build, and lead. We are asked to believe that knowledge built up step by step, each generation adding to the last. Yet the stones disagree with this neat order. At place after place, the earliest layers are the most advanced. Blocks cut with math-like exactness, surfaces polished as if by machines, joints that have survived earthquakes for centuries. Later builders reused these foundations but could not match their skill. If progress moved in a straight line, how can it be that the oldest stones show the greatest skill? Stand at Sacsayhuamán in Peru, where walls zigzag above Cusco. The blocks tower over visitors, some weighing 200 tons, shaped into 12-sided shapes that fit together like puzzle pieces. Earthquakes have shaken the Andes for centuries, yet these stones have not moved a millimeter. A few miles away at Ollantaytambo, pink granite giant stones rise with cuts so straight they look like the bite marks of saws. Half a world away in Lebanon's Baalbek, foundation stones of nearly 1,000 tons each sit in perfect formation, too huge for any known Roman machine to have lifted. On Bolivia's high plain, H-shaped blocks at Puma Punku show machine-like exactness measured in millimeters. On Easter Island, walls fitted from hard basalt copy the methods of the Andes, though separated by 6,000 miles of ocean. Even in Montana, a granite wall shows many-sided fitting and strange magnetic oddities echoing the same building signatures found in Peru and the Middle East. And in Siberia's frozen mountains, blocks guessed at 3,000 tons rise in silent challenge of every explanation geology can offer. The stones repeat themselves like a chorus in a forgotten psalm. No matter the continent, no matter the culture that built above them, they share the same marks, the same impossible size, the same silence in historical record. There are no writings describing how these stones were cut from quarries, moved, or set in place. Civilizations that otherwise wrote about rituals, wars, and harvests left no words about the greatest building feats ever attempted. It is as though the knowledge itself had been erased. Regular archaeology explains each site separately. Romans must have moved Baalbek's trilithon with lots of workers. The Tiwanaku culture must have carved Puma Punku with copper chisels. Polynesians must have shaped basalt at Vainapu through patience alone. But when these explanations are placed side by side, how unlikely they are becomes obvious. Can so many different cultures, separated by oceans and thousands of years, have separately discovered methods that even today would challenge industrial equipment? How many times must the unlikely repeat before we see it as a pattern rather than chance? Perhaps the megaliths are not separate wonders, but pieces of a single forgotten story. A story of knowledge that once reached around the globe, then fell silent. Legends across continents recall disaster, floods that swallowed continents, fire from the sky, seas that rose overnight. Could these stones be the survivors of that erasure, foundations that lasted when everything else was swept away? Listen closely. The stones speak through their geometry, through the refusal of their seams to give in to time. They remind us that history is not a straight road, but a broken mirror. Beneath the official story lies another story, one that suggests we are not the first to master matter and design, not the first to reach beyond what seemed possible. In the quiet of night, when the stars wheel above and the earth grows still, the walls seem almost alive. Their silence is not emptiness, but purpose. It waits for us to hear. And if we dare to listen, the journey begins. Not in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but in the stones themselves. Above the city of Cusco, where the Andes cradle the sky, a fortress of impossible design rises. Here, the walls do more than refuse silence. They demand attention. They are known as the walls of the Royal Falcon, and they may be the first voice in this forgotten chorus. High above the rooftops of Cusco, where the Andes hold the horizon in jagged stone, rises a fortress that should not exist. It is called Sacsayhuamán, the Royal Falcon, a citadel that rules the valley below. From a distance, its walls appear as zigzag battle walls. But as you get closer, the mystery deepens. These are not ordinary walls. They are a riddle cut into stone. Each block towers over the visitor, some as tall as a house, others weighing as much as 200 tons. Yet they do not sit like simple rectangles. Every stone is a many-sided shape with a dozen or more sides, carved and angled to lock with its neighbors in a three-dimensional puzzle of impossible difficulty. The joints are so tight that even after centuries of earthquakes and rains, not a single stone has slipped. You cannot slide a sheet of paper into the gaps. This is exactness beyond any reasonable expectation for a culture said to rely on bronze chisels, ropes, and lots of workers. Imagine trying to design such a wall today. You would begin with computer models, digital scans, and 3D pictures. Cranes would lift each block, moving them until they settled into place. Even then, exactness of less than a millimeter would be rare. Now imagine doing it without machines, without steel, without math as we know it. The stones of Sacsayhuamán do not only fit. They seem to have been thought of as parts of a single geometric vision, each surface expecting the angle of another, each curve spreading weight across multiple points. Why build this way? The usual answer is earthquake resistance. Many-sided joints allow the walls to sway without collapse, bending like stone muscles. But this answer creates a deeper mystery. How did the builders know such methods would work? Earthquake engineering is not natural. It requires watching, testing, and thinking insight. The Inca left no records describing experiments, no manuals of design. They left only the walls themselves, as if the knowledge had vanished the moment the stones were set. Archaeologists speak of building phases at Sacsayhuamán. The lowest and most massive blocks show the greatest skill. Above that rise smaller stones fitted with less care, more in keeping with known Inca methods. This order tells a quiet story that the Inca inherited these foundations, rather than created them. They built upon what they found, filling in gaps with their own work, but they never equaled the mastery of the earliest layers. The further upward the wall climbs, the less exact it becomes, an echo of knowledge fading over time. Walk along the edge, and you will notice something even stranger. Many stones have small knobs, bumps that serve no obvious purpose. They do not add strength. They are not decoration. Yet the same knobs appear at megalithic sites half a world away. In Baalbek, in Egypt, on Easter Island, a fingerprint repeated in stone, linking cultures that official history claims never met. Nearby, other blocks show scoop marks, curved dents as though the rock had once been softened, scooped out like clay, then hardened again. These features mock our ideas about chisels and hammers. They hint at methods we do not have or no longer remember. Stand close to the walls at sunset, and you will see the surfaces curve outward ever so slightly. Rounded faces press against one another, increasing contact and spreading stress with remarkable efficiency. This is not accident. It is geometry as language, a conversation between stone and builder. To carve such surfaces, the makers would have needed to picture forces the way engineers today use stress computer programs. Yet here it is written in granite left by hands that wrote without writing. The Inca themselves recorded everything from harvest to rituals through quipes. knotted cords that preserved their history. But nowhere do their records describe the shaping or moving of 200-ton stones. Silence rules where explanation should exist. The same silence repeats across the world. The greatest feats of ancient stonework are those least written about. It's as though the knowledge was already forgotten by the time history began. The question stays in the thin air of the Andes. Who first carved these walls, and why? Were they survivors of a disaster, preserving pieces of lost knowledge in unmovable stone? Were they voices from an older cycle of civilization, erased before the Inca ever rose? The walls do not answer. They only last, mocking the centuries, whispering in seams that will not break. As the evening deepens, the zigzag walls cast shadows like the wings of a falcon spread against the mountains. Below, Cusco glows with modern lights. Yet above the stones keep their watch. They remind us that history may not be a ladder climbing upward, but a wheel that turns, rising and falling through ages of memory and forgetting. From the Andes, our path leads east across deserts and seas to another wall of giants. There in Lebanon's fertile valley stand stones heavier still, blocks that challenge even the idea of possibility. They are known as the Trilithon of Baalbek, and they too refuse to remain silent. In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, where mountains slope into fertile plains, and the air still carries whispers of Rome, 3 huge stones rest in place as if they had grown there. Each one measures over 60 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. Their weight is almost beyond imagination, around 900 tons apiece. To put that in view, each block is more than 30 times heavier than the stones of Stonehenge, and nearly 10 times the weight of the largest blocks in the Great Pyramid. They are called the Trilithon, and they form the foundation of Baalbek's great temple complex. Above them rise the ruins of Roman greatness, columns, courtyards, and holy places once dedicated to Jupiter. But the foundation is different. It does not speak with the language of Rome. Its stones are too massive, too silent, too unexplainable. Imagine lifting a block the size of a train car, weighing nearly 1,000 tons, and placing it with such exactness that it lines up perfectly with its neighbors. Modern cranes could struggle to move even one of them. Yet here they are, stacked 20 feet above the ground, blended seamlessly into a wall that has lasted for thousands of years. No Roman record describes their movement. No engineer left behind instructions. For a culture that celebrated its technology triumphs in careful detail, this silence is deafening. In the nearby quarry lies an even greater puzzle, an unfinished giant stone known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It stretches nearly 70 feet in length and weighs over 1,200 tons. And beneath it, discovered only recently, rests an even larger block, nearly 1,650 tons, the largest quarried stone ever documented. They lie half-cut from the bedrock, abandoned as if the builders vanished mid-task. Why begin to carve stones larger than anything in use if no way existed to move them? Why quarry blocks so huge only to leave them behind? The logic of ordinary building fails here. The size suggests ambition on a level we can barely understand. A willingness to shape the earth itself into monuments of permanence. Theories fill the air. Some suggest ramps and rollers, armies of workers pulling with ropes, perhaps slippery paths of clay or water. Yet such methods strain against the numbers. Moving a 900-ton block, even a few feet, would demand a feat of teamwork bordering on the impossible. Lifting it 20 feet into place with exactness. This belongs less to guesswork and more to mystery. The Romans certainly built magnificently. Their columns, arches, and water systems still stand as proof of their genius. But at Baalbek, the contrast is sharp. The Roman stones above bear the marks of their methods. Drill holes for lifting pins, standard sizes, logical building order. The trilithon does not. It stands outside the grammar of Rome. Its stones speak with another voice. Some archaeologists whisper of older builders, a civilization coming before Rome by thousands of years. Weathering patterns on the megaliths suggest greater age than the Roman structures above them. Objects found in the valley trace human presence back thousands of years further. Still, could it be that Baalbek was already ancient when the Romans arrived? A sacred site reused and crowned with their temples, while the true foundations belong to another time entirely. Legends echo this possibility. Local law speaks of giants who moved the stones, of beings who built with knowledge beyond human reach. Compass readings near the trilithon sometimes fail, as if the stones themselves disturbed the Earth's magnetic field. And the sheer size echoes with other megalithic mysteries. The knobs on stones in Peru, the seamless joints of Easter Island, the exactness of Puma Punku. Separate sites, yet all sharing traits too similar to dismiss. Stand before the trilithon at dusk, and the stones seem to vibrate with their own gravity. They rule not only the land, but the imagination. They are questions carved into limestone, questions too heavy to move, too large to ignore. Who set them in place, and why? Were they part of a vanished technology, a tradition of megalithic mastery scattered across continents? As the valley darkens and the temples of Jupiter fade into shadow, the trilithon remains bright in its challenge. Rome may have built above it, but the foundation belongs to another story, one that refuses to line up with our textbooks. The stones are not only heavy in mass, they are heavy with meaning, carrying the weight of a forgotten chapter in human history. From the valleys of Lebanon, our path carries us south and west to the high plateau of Bolivia. There, at 13,000 feet, lies a site that looks less like ancient building and more like pieces of an industrial factory. It is called Puma Punku, and its stones are carved as though by machines. At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, on the windswept plateau of Bolivia's Altiplano, lie the shattered remains of something that should not exist. The air is thin here, the sun sharp, the nights bitterly cold. Yet scattered across the plain are stones that look like the pieces of a taken-apart machine rather than relics of an ancient culture. This is Puma Punku, a site whose very name has become the same as the impossible. The blocks lie in mess, as though thrown apart by some huge force. Some weigh more than 100 tons. Their surfaces cut with such exactness that they could pass for the products of modern industrial equipment. Straight lines extend across meters of hard volcanic andesite, keeping exactness of less than a millimeter. Angles meet at perfect right angles. Corners hold sharp, despite centuries of weathering, and channels run as if carved by spinning saws. The most famous of these are the H-shaped blocks. At first look, they look simple, repeated units with a basic shape, but closer look reveals a geometric skill that defies explanation. Each block locks with its neighbors in multiple directions, allowing them to fit together like building pieces of a larger design. The repetition is exact. Block after block shows identical sizes as if mass-produced with standard measurements. This is not the slow, imperfect work of trial and error. This is exactness on a scale that speaks of industry. Consider the material itself. Andesite ranks nearly as hard as steel on the Mohs scale. To shape it with copper chisels, the tools given to pre-Columbian cultures would be like carving iron with a fingernail. Even today, working andesite requires diamond-tipped drills and saws. Yet here, in a site dated to over 1,000 years ago, the stones show finishes so smooth that machine workers have compared them to milled surfaces. Drill holes pierce straight through 100-ton blocks, keeping constant width and balance throughout their depth. In some cases, these holes line up perfectly with matching holes in other blocks, creating continuous channels across multiple stones. Mainstream archaeology gives Puma Punku to the Tiwanaku culture which grew in the region between the 3rd and 12th century CE. The Tiwanaku were indeed skilled builders, raising pyramids, temples, and ceremonial platforms. Yet their surviving works show nothing close to the exactness of Puma Punku. Their building relied on smaller stones and mud mortar, elegant, but far simpler than the megalithic mastery scattered here. The gap between known Tiwanaku methods and Puma Punku stonework is not a step, but a gap. Was Puma Punku truly the creation of the Tiwanaku? Or did they inherit a site far older, built by hands whose knowledge had already been lost? Radiocarbon dating only reveals when organic material was present, not when the stones were cut, and so the true age of Puma Punku remains hidden. Some researchers suggest the megaliths come before the Tiwanaku by thousands of years, perhaps remains of a civilization erased by the same disaster forces remembered in myths across the world. Legends tell of Viracocha, the great teacher god who arrived from the sea, bringing knowledge of building and farming. Some accounts describe him as a bearded figure, tall and strange among the Andean people, who taught them how to shape stone as if it were clay. And then, as suddenly as he came, he left across the ocean, leaving behind only echoes. Could Puma Punku be the physical memory of such knowledge? A knowledge no longer understood even by those who once respected it. Walk among the ruins, and you sense interruption. Many blocks appear unfinished, as if abandoned mid-process. Some are half-cut from the quarry. Others show incomplete drill holes or saw marks stopped suddenly. It is as though the builders stopped their work in an instant, leaving behind a factory frozen in time. Catastrophe, war, or a sudden erasure of the very civilization that thought of them. The stones themselves whisper possibilities. Some researchers point to vitrification, surfaces that appear partially melted, as if exposed to intense heat. Others speak of chemical softening, recalling Andean legends of plants whose secret juices could make stone bendable. Still others wonder if levitation or vibration played a role, the use of forces we no longer control. None of these theories are accepted by regular archaeology, yet all of them attempt to deal with what lies in plain sight, evidence that challenges everything we assume about the limits of the ancient world. Stand before an H-block in the fading light, and it seems less like a relic of the past than a piece of the future misplaced. The wind sweeps across the plateau, carrying the sound of nothingness. But the stones themselves seem to hum with purpose. They are not crude remains. They are exact, deliberate, and unyielding. From the Altiplano, the mystery travels further still, across the greatest ocean on Earth. There, on a lonely island more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continent, another wall rises with the same impossible signature. Its stones lock with the exactness of Peru's sacred valley, though separated by a vastness of sea. This place is called Vinapu, and it may be the most haunting connection of all. Far out in the Pacific Ocean, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited land, lies Easter Island, Rapa Nui. To most, it is a place of huge stone heads, the moai, gazing with serious eyes across an empty horizon. But hidden away on the island's southern coast is a less-known mystery, one that speaks not of statues, but of walls. It is called Vinapu, and it may be the strongest whisper of connection between distant worlds. At first sight, the Vinapu wall seems almost ordinary. A row of dark basalt blocks, fitted together to form the foundation of a ceremonial platform. But step closer and the illusion vanishes. The stones are not roughly stacked. They are polished smooth. Their surfaces are lined so perfectly that no blade of grass, no strand of hair can slide between them. Each block locks in complex patterns, the joints angled and beveled with the same strange exactness found in the megalithic walls of Peru's sacred valley. How could such identical methods appear on opposite sides of the greatest ocean on Earth? The Andes and Easter Island are separated by 6,000 miles of sea. Regular history tells us Polynesian navigators reached the island by canoe, carrying little more than food, water, and oral traditions. Their building elsewhere in the Pacific relied on wood, thatch, coral blocks, not exactness-fitted basalt. Nowhere in Polynesia do we see such masonry, except for here, in this windswept corner of Rapa Nui. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer who launched the Kon-Tiki expedition, was among the first to draw attention to Vinapoo's strange resemblance to Peruvian walls. He dug up the site in the 1950s and decided that cultural contact between South America and Easter Island was not only possible, but likely. Later researchers dismissed his claims, preferring the story of Polynesian isolation. Yet the stones remain, their geometry speaking louder than scholarly denial. Legends of the islanders add weight to the mystery. Oral traditions tell of long-eared people and short-eared people, of rulers who demanded massive buildings, of ancestors who came from far away. Genetic studies revealed traces of South American DNA in the Rapa Nui population, coming before European contact. Even the sweet potato, a crop native to South America, was grown on Easter Island centuries before the first Europeans sailed the Pacific. Together, these clues suggest that the ocean may not have been an unbreakable barrier, but a highway. Its waves carrying knowledge and people far beyond what textbooks allow. Stand at Vinapoo and place your hand on the basalt blocks. The stone is volcanic, hard, and unyielding, yet the builders shaped it as if it were clay. The joints curve and meet in three-dimensional perfection, spreading weight without mortar. Storms have hit this coast for centuries. Earthquakes have shaken it, yet the wall remains steady, untouched. Its lasting is not only building-related, but symbolic. Evidence that a tradition of building once reached across oceans. Why here on a remote spot of volcanic rock? Why carry methods from the Andes across thousands of miles of empty sea, unless, of course, the builders of Vinapoo and the builders of Sacsayhuamán shared not just knowledge, but origin. Perhaps they were heirs of a civilization that once stretched across continents, its pieces scattered by a flood, or a fire so huge that memory itself was broken. As the Pacific winds howl and the waves crash endlessly against the shore, the stones of Vinapoo whisper the same chorus as those in Peru. Exactness, permanence, silence. They do not explain themselves. They only last. And in their lasting, they connect continents, suggesting a unity of knowledge the official record refuses to admit. From this isolated island, our journey shifts to another remote land, not across an ocean this time, but deep into the wilderness of North America, where hidden beneath forests and snow lies yet another wall of stone, one that bears the same signature as Peru, Baalbek, and Easter Island. It is called the Sage Wall, and it may be the most unexpected voice in this global chorus. In the remote wilderness of Montana's Beartooth Mountains, far from the temples of the Andes or the ruins of the Middle East, a wall of granite comes out from the earth like a secret revealed too late. For years it lay hidden beneath fallen timber and forest debris, unnoticed by the world. Only when the landowners cleared part of their property did the structure reveal itself. 275 feet of stone rising from the mountain, like the exposed bones of an ancient giant. At first look, it could be mistaken for geology, a rock formation shaped by frost and erosion. But step closer and the illusion dissolves. The blocks are fitted with strange exactness. Some weigh more than 90 tons, their faces flattened, their edges lined up in many-sided patterns. They lock not in 2 dimensions, but in 3, as though designed to resist both gravity and time. The wall rises 25 feet above ground, and ground-penetrating radar suggests it extends 15 feet below. A monolith, half buried, half revealed. What makes Sage Wall extraordinary is not only its size, but its signature. Across the granite surfaces appear the same mysterious knobs, small bumps found at megalithic sites across the world. In Peru, they stick out from the stones of Sacsayhuamán. In Lebanon, they appear on the trilithon at Baalbek. On Easter Island, they mark the walls of Vinapoo. And here they are again in the forests of Montana, as though written in a language of stone that reached across continents. Visitors have reported magnetic oddities near the wall. Compasses spin, unable to find true north. Magnets stick unnaturally to the granite surfaces, as if the stone itself had been charged or treated. Granite can get magnetism under rare conditions, yet the steadiness and strength at Sage Wall suggest purpose rather than accident. It recalls similar events noted at other ancient sites where stone and energy seem bound together in ways we do not yet understand. Could this be natural formation? Some geologists argue yes, pointing to vertical cracks and natural breaking in granite formations. Yet critics note that similar rock formations in the region show nothing like Sage Wall's many-sided exactness. Nature can crack stone, but it does not typically produce locking faces that copy the engineering of megalithic walls half a world away. If Sage Wall is artificial, then who built it? According to mainstream history, no civilization in prehistoric North America had the means to quarry, move, and fit 90-ton blocks of granite. Indigenous cultures of the region built in wood, earth, and hide. Their traditions rich in spirit and story, but not in megalithic building. No oral legends mention walls of stone crafted with such purpose. And yet the wall exists, unmovable, undeniable. Perhaps the answer lies not in regional history, but in global context. If we accept that similar methods appear in Peru, Lebanon, Easter Island, and Egypt, then Sage Wall may be one more piece of the same forgotten inheritance. A chapter of history erased not by accident, but by time itself. A voice from a civilization that once knew how to bend stone to its will, and whose echoes can still be heard in the forests of Montana. Stand before Sage Wall as dusk gathers in the mountains, and the stones seem to think. Shadows lengthen across their faces. The knobs catch the fading light, and the silence deepens. It is the same silence that stays in Cusco, in Baalbek, in Puma Punku, in Vinapoo, a silence not of absence, but of hiding. The wall does not explain itself. It simply waits, holding its secrets in granite. From the forests of Montana, our journey turns once more toward the desert sun, back to the land of pyramids. There, at the base of Giza's monuments, lie stones nearly forgotten by history. Foundations so huge that even the pyramids above them seem smaller. They may be the clearest sign yet that the Egyptians built upon something older, something inherited, something remembered only in stone. Beneath the desert sun, the pyramids of Giza rise like eternal guards, their limestone faces catching the light as they have for thousands of years. Millions of visitors gaze upward at their soaring angles, photographing the monuments that symbolize Egypt's lasting glory. Yet few pause to look down to study the base upon which these wonders rest. For hidden beneath the greatness of the pyramids lies another mystery, one that may be even older, even more mysterious. At the foundations of Giza's pyramids sit blocks so massive they dwarf the familiar 2.5-ton stones of the superstructure. Some weigh between 50 and 80 tons, carved from granite and limestone, hauled from quarries hundreds of miles away. These blocks were not placed carelessly. They were cut with exactness, lined up so exactly that the seams between them remain almost invisible. Walk along the base of Khufu's pyramid, and you will see stones that rival those of Baalbek in size and accuracy. They are not the stars of Egypt's story. They are its silent stage. No hieroglyphs explain their moving, No papyrus records their placement. The Egyptians, so careful in documenting rituals, harvests, and royal orders, left nothing about the movement of blocks larger than any their civilization is known to have handled. It is as if these foundations were already ancient when the pyramids were built, inherited from an earlier age, and added into new monuments. The pattern repeats across Egyptian building. The earlier structures, those of the 4th dynasty, show the largest, most exactly fitted stones. Later pyramids, while impressive, use smaller blocks, less exact fitting, and less lasting building. If progress moved in a straight line, the opposite should be true, but here again, the story seems reversed. The deepest layers whisper of knowledge fading, not advancing. In the quarries of Aswan, you can still see unfinished blocks where the granite was cut directly from bedrock. Tool marks ripple across the surfaces, but some cuts are too clean, too exact to match the copper chisels and dolerite pounders given to Egyptian builders. The possibility comes up that other methods lost to time were once in use. Some researchers suggest the foundations show evidence of heat treatment or even geopolymer methods, similar to concrete. Others believe the blocks were shaped and moved using rules of balance and vibration, methods we no longer understand. Stand at the base of the Great Pyramid and place your hand on one of these foundation stones. It is cool even in the desert heat, unmovable beneath your palm. Imagine the effort required to move it. Hauling it onto barges, floating it down the Nile, dragging it across the desert, and setting it in place with millimeter accuracy. Even today, with cranes and laser measurements, such a task would test the limits of engineering. And yet, these blocks have stood unshaken for thousands of years. What story do they tell? That Egypt's greatness was built upon something older, that knowledge of megalithic building was already ancient by the time the first pharaohs rose, or that civilizations rise in cycles, inheriting pieces of lost mastery and building upon them until the memory fades. As the sun climbs higher and shadows shorten against the pyramid's base, the silence of these foundations becomes louder than the monuments themselves. They carry not only the weight of stone, but the weight of forgotten history. They suggest that beneath Egypt's glory lies a deeper global tradition of megalithic knowledge. From the sands of Giza, our journey shifts north and east into the remote wilderness of Siberia. There in the Shaurya Mountains stand stones so huge that they make even the blocks of Giza and Baalbek seem small. Some weigh thousands of tons, giants among giants. They form walls that rise against the sky, challenging not only history, but possibility itself. In the heart of southern Siberia, where the Shaurya Mountains push their granite shoulders above endless forests of pine and birch, lies a sight that bends the mind. The landscape here is harsh. Long winters, sudden storms, valleys filled with silence. Yet within these ridges, scattered across cliffs often covered in snow, stand blocks of stone so huge that they make the mighty trilithon of Baalbek appear almost modest. Some of these stones are guessed to weigh nearly 3,000 tons, far larger than anything ever documented as moved by human hands. The site is known as Gornaya Shaurya. For centuries, it remained hidden from the world, hidden by both its remoteness and the closed borders of the Soviet era. Only in 2013 did a team of Russian researchers reach it, cameras and compasses in hand. What they discovered was stunning. A wall of granite rising nearly 140 feet into the air, stretching over 700 feet along the mountainside. The blocks appear to be stacked deliberately, flat faces pressed against one another, seams running in near-perfect straight lines, edges forming angles too steady to be dismissed as natural chaos. If this is geology, it is geology, unlike anything else we know. Granite does crack, but it does not normally crack into what looks like building. Blocks the size of houses, fitted into formations that look like terraces and walls. The sheer regularity of Gornaya Shoria challenges chance. Each stone looks as if it were quarried, cut, and placed with purpose. The size is almost beyond understanding. Imagine a single block the size of an apartment building, separated from the earth and set into place. At 3,000 tons, such a block weighs more than entire pyramids made of smaller stones. No crane today could lift it. No industrial quarry could move it, and no ancient tools described in archaeology could have shaped it. Yet there they sit, embedded in the mountain, silent witnesses to something that challenges every rule we know about history. Some stones show strange signs of heat. Portions of granite appear fused, as though once softened by temperatures high enough to melt rock, before cooling back into solid mass. If true, this points to methods beyond anything known in recorded history, methods capable of changing geology itself. Was this accident of volcanic heat, or evidence of purposeful controlled energy applied by hands we can no longer imagine? The first expeditions reported oddities difficult to ignore. Compasses spun wildly, unable to find north. Magnetic readings dropped into negative values, as though the stones themselves were charged with forces out of place. Around the main wall, massive blocks lie scattered downslope. Some cracked, others thrown far from their original alignment. It looks less like erosion and more like the aftermath of a disaster, an explosion or an upheaval that tore apart structures of impossible size. Was Gornaya Shoria once a fortress broken by catastrophe, or has it always been a place where nature and mystery mixed? Official voices in Russia say that this is natural. They describe jointed granite cracked by the pressures of time, the freeze and thaw of thousands of years producing the appearance of walls. Yet critics point out that if this were the case, similar formations should be common throughout Siberia's mountains. Instead, Gornaya Shoria stands alone, unique in its exactness, unmatched in its size. If artificial, the meanings are stunning. No culture known to history in this region, whether hunter-gatherer tribes or later nomadic peoples, had the means to quarry, shape, and stack such stones. Could these walls date, not to a few thousand years ago, but tens of thousands, reaching back into a time before memory? Could they be remains of a civilization erased long before history began, leaving only granite to keep its watch? To stand beneath Gornaya Shoria's towering blocks is to feel dwarfed, not only by stone, but by possibility. The forest presses close, winds whip across the ridges, and the walls loom like the ruins of a forgotten fortress. They feel less like a random rock formation, and more like a threshold, a doorway left open into a time beyond memory, when giants, whether real or symbolic, shaped the earth in ways we no longer understand. From the frozen silence of Siberia, the trail of megaliths bends back to South America. High in Peru's sacred valley, above rivers and terraces, rise 6 pink granite giant stones, lined up with breathtaking exactness. They form part of Ollantaytambo's Temple of the Sun, another monument where the stones speak louder than history dares to admit. High in Peru's sacred valley, where the Andes rise like titans against a sky so thin that every breath feels like a deal, stands a fortress temple that challenges everything we think we know about the past. Ollantaytambo is remembered in history as an Inca stronghold, a place of terraces, stairways, and royal estates. But hidden within its familiar ruins is something that does not fit the story. A building older, stranger, and almost impossible to explain. It is called the Temple of the Sun. Here, 6 towering giant stones of pink granite form what remains of a huge wall. Each block stands nearly 14 feet tall, weighing between 70 and 100 tons. They were quarried from a site more than 50 kilometers away, across sheer cliffs and through rugged mountains. To imagine hauling such weight across this landscape without steel tools, without wheels, without cranes, is to imagine the absurd. Yet the giant stones stand unmoved, weathering centuries of storms and earthquakes, as if nothing could touch them. The skill is beyond startling. The stone faces shine as though polished by modern machines. Their joints are so exact that even the thinnest blade cannot pass between them. Smaller stones fill the gaps with the same exactness, each one carved uniquely to lock into its place. The structure is not a wall, but a puzzle, a three-dimensional geometry, thought of with foresight and skill that rival anything seen in modern engineering. And all of this achieved at nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. But the appearance of uniform mastery fails when we step behind the giant stones. The rear wall is crude, the stones smaller and fitted with clay mortar, a style entirely matching with known Inca methods. The contrast is too sharp to ignore. The Inca built upon foundations they inherited. They kept the sacredness of the site. But the knowledge that carved the front giant stones was no longer theirs to control. The Temple of the Sun seems to preserve a conversation between two civilizations, one that mastered stone with impossible exactness, and another that followed, building with what knowledge remained. All around Ollantaytambo lie clues to this interruption. Along ancient moving paths, abandoned giant stones rest, half-carved, having straight cuts as though made by huge saws. Some blocks show curved dents, the same scoop marks seen at Sacsayhuamán and Puma Punku, suggesting that the stone may once have been softened and shaped before hardening again. Moving grooves are visible, as if builders had prepared to move the blocks, only to stop suddenly. It is as though building stopped mid-breath, frozen in time. The myths of the Andes whisper a possible memory. They tell of Viracocha, the great teacher god, who walked these highlands before the Inca, bringing knowledge of building and shaping. Some tales say he taught people to make stone flow like water, to mold it into walls that would last forever. In legend, he vanished across the sea, leaving behind only the works of his followers. Myths, perhaps, but their echoes stretch far, echoing with stories of godlike teachers across the world. At sunset, when the mountains burn red and shadows pool in the terraces, the giant stones of Ollantaytambo glow with a strange life. Their edges are too sharp, their geometry too purposeful to dismiss as primitive effort. They are pieces of purpose, messages in granite from a past that does not fit our timeline. So, what happened here? Was Ollantaytambo the creation of a people who vanished in catastrophe? Their memory changed into gods? Or is it a chapter in a far larger story, one that stretches across oceans, linking stones from Peru to Lebanon, from Easter Island to Egypt? The walls offer no answers, only questions. Questions embedded so deeply in stone that they may outlast every empire that dares to stand upon them. The wind carries those questions across the sacred valley. They echo like a chorus, harmonizing with the voices of Sacsayhuamán, Baalbek, Puma Punku, Vinapu, Giza, and the granite mountains of Siberia. Together they form not isolated mysteries, but a single song of impossibility. A map carved into the earth itself. From Ollantaytambo, our journey widens its focus. We begin to look not only at the stones, but at the repeating signatures they carry. What unites the knobs, the many-sided joints, the abandoned blocks, the silences in the record? What happens when we stop treating them as chances and begin to read them as chapters of a single hidden book? A book written in stone, scattered across continents and waiting to be remembered. Walk the world with patient eyes, and the same signatures repeat. From the high Andes to the windswept Pacific, from desert plateaus to Siberian forests, the stones whisper in unison. They share traits too specific, too steady to be dismissed as chance. To trace these patterns is to glimpse the outline of a forgotten tradition, a blueprint written not on paper, but carved into the earth itself. One of the most striking motifs is many-sided masonry. At Sacsayhuamán, blocks lock with a dozen angled faces. At Vinapu on Easter Island, basalt stones meet with the same beveled joints. At Ollantaytambo, giant stones lock into one another as though they were thought of in the same workshop. The purpose is both practical and poetic. Walls that resist earthquakes, but also express a geometric mastery beyond mere usefulness. Then there are the mysterious knobs. Small bumps stick out from blocks at Baalbek, from walls in Peru, from stones in Montana's Sage Wall. They serve no clear building function, yet they appear again across continents. Were they remains of a lost building process, markers of alignment, or symbols in a language we no longer speak? Another repeating feature lies in the unfinished blocks. At Gornaya Shoria, massive stones lie scattered as though torn apart mid-project. At Puma Punku, H-blocks remain half-carved, drill holes abandoned in stone. At Ollantaytambo, giant stones lie along the quarry path, prepared for moving that never happened. These interruptions suggest sudden endings, catastrophe, abandonment, or collapse of knowledge. Magnetic oddities also surface in curious patterns. At Sage Wall, compasses spin. At Baalbek, visitors report interruptions in readings near the trilithon. Similar events echo across megalithic sites worldwide, hinting at a purposeful interaction between stone and unseen forces, whether natural or engineered. But perhaps the most telling pattern is the silence of history. The Incas recorded everything with quipus, yet said nothing of many-sided walls. The Romans boasted of water systems and amphitheaters, but not of moving 1,000-ton stones. Egyptians filled tombs with texts, but none describe hauling 80-ton foundation blocks. Wherever the greatest feats of stonework exist, the record falls quiet. The silence itself is a pattern, one of absence, as though memory had been wiped clean. Viewed separately, each site can be explained away. Peru, the genius of the Inca. Baalbek, the muscle of Rome. Puma Punku, the persistence of Tiwanaku. But taken together, the explanations crack. Same motifs appear oceans apart. Without evidence of communication, without developmental stages, without written memory. The puzzle only begins to make sense if we imagine these sites not as isolated achievements, but as surviving pieces of a single global inheritance. What if the same knowledge once reached across continents, carried by a civilization that came before recorded history? A civilization shattered by catastrophe, leaving only scattered voices in stone. In this view, the patterns are not mysteries at all, but continuity. Threads of a fabric almost erased, still clinging to the earth. Stand before these walls and you feel it. A rhythm in the repetition, a pulse across the globe. It is not progress we are seeing, but memory. Folded time expressed in granite, basalt, and limestone. A reminder that history may not be a straight line, but circular, rising and falling like breath. From these patterns of stone, we turn to another set of echoes. Those not carved, but spoken. Across cultures, across continents. Myths of flood and fire tell of worlds erased, of civilizations drowned, of knowledge lost. The legends of the great disaster may hold the key to why the stones last, while the voices around them have vanished. Across every horizon of the human story, there stays a tale of endings. Legends told by firelight carved into clay, whispered in songs. All speak of waters that rose, fires that fell, skies that split apart. The stones we have walked among suggest knowledge that appeared fully formed, and then was lost. The myths of the world suggest why. In Mesopotamia, the oldest written epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells of Utnapishtim, a man who survived a flood that drowned kings and kingdoms alike. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds an ark as waters rise to cover the earth. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned of a flood by a divine fish, saving the seeds of life in a boat. In the Americas, the Hopi tell a time when fire and water forced their ancestors to take shelter in the earth before coming out into a new world. Polynesian songs tell of lands swallowed by the sea. The Andean peoples remember Viracocha sending floods to wipe away a world before remaking it anew. The patterns in myth echo the patterns in stone. Stories scattered across continents describe not local disasters, but global disasters. They remember not just the destruction of people, but the erasure of knowledge, as if civilization itself was reset. Some scholars argue these are echoes of the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, when glaciers melted, seas rose more than 100 meters, and coastlines vanished beneath the waves. Others propose comet impacts, volcanic eruptions, or solar storms. Natural forces so huge they would have seemed like divine punishment. Whatever the cause, the memory survived, carried in story long after its details had blurred. The myths also speak of teachers, gods, or culture bringers who arrived after the catastrophe. In the Andes, Viracocha comes out from Lake Titicaca to restore order. In Samaria, the Abkalu, semi-divine sages, bring back the arts of civilization. In Egypt, Thoth and Osiris are remembered as carriers of lost wisdom. Again and again, we find the same motif: catastrophe followed by guidance. Knowledge returning in pieces through figures respected as divine. Were these gods truly deities, or survivors of a prior world carrying memory across the gap of time? Imagine what would happen if our civilization were struck by sudden disaster. Cities drowned, records destroyed, technology lost. Survivors would tell their children of machines that flew and lights that burned without fire. But in time, those stories would harden into myth. Thousands of years later, only pieces would remain. Mysterious ruins, stories of floods, whispers of forgotten gods. Perhaps this is exactly what the megaliths and myths represent. The last notes of a cycle that ended in water and fire. The parallels grow haunting when we consider their universality. Cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years preserve the same themes. A world before, a great destruction, a rebirth after. It is as though humanity carries a shared scar, written in story, just as the stones carry it in silence. From here, our path moves deeper into guessing into one of the most thought-provoking hypotheses ever proposed. If the myths of flood and fire recall a real destruction, what was destroyed? Was there truly a global civilization? One whose memory survives only in scattered ruins and whispered stories. Some claim the answer lies in the Pacific Ocean, in the story of a vanished continent called Mu. In the early 20th century, a retired British colonel named James Churchward sat with a high-ranking priest in India and was shown something that would change the course of his life. The priest revealed ancient stone tablets written with a language so old that only a handful of men could still read it. Churchward persuaded him to teach him this forgotten writing, and over years of painstaking study, he claimed to unlock a story unlike any other. The tablets spoke of a lost continent, a vast motherland that once grew in the Pacific Ocean. Its name was Mu. According to Churchward's translations, Mu was no ordinary landmass. It stretched across thousands of miles, larger than South America, and supported a civilization of more than 60 million people. This was not a patchwork of kingdoms, but a unified culture divided into 10 tribes, ruled under one government, guided by a shared spiritual philosophy. Its influence, he said, spread outward across the world through colonies that carried its knowledge to distant shores. If true, this would explain much. The strange exactness of Peruvian stonework, the mirrored walls of Vinapu, the huge blocks of Baalbek, the puzzling giant stones of Giza, all could be pieces of Mu's legacy scattered across the globe when the motherland sank. Churchward described Mu not as myth, but as history, a civilization that grew between 50,000 and 12,000 years ago, only to vanish in a single disaster night of fire, earthquakes, and rising seas. Mainstream archaeology dismisses Churchward's claims as fantasy, lacking evidence built on mistranslation and guessing. Yet, the idea of a lost Pacific continent is not unique to him. Polynesian traditions speak of Hawaii, a homeland now gone. In Maori lore, Hawaii is the place of origin and of return after death. In Micronesian legends, islands are said to have sunk beneath the waves. The Maya told of Atlantal, a homeland destroyed in catastrophe. Even the name Mu appears in Hawaiian song and in Central American myth, describing places swallowed by water. Geology offers no simple support. The Pacific seafloor shows no evidence of a vanished continent of such size. Yet the timing of Mu's supposed destruction around 12,000 years ago lines up with the end of the last ice age, when sea levels rose dramatically, drowning coastal settlements worldwide. Could the stories of Mu be memories not of a continent, but of a network of island cultures growing when seas were lower, then wiped out as the oceans rose? Churchward's writings describe Mu as technologically advanced, though not in the sense of steel and electricity. He spoke of a civilization that mastered energy in ways foreign to us, controlling natural forces, perhaps even working with stone itself. Some researchers have linked this to the mysterious softened stone traditions in the Andes, or to the possibility of geopolymer methods that made stone bendable. Others take it further, suggesting levitation, vibration, or harnessing of Earth's magnetic fields. What is most compelling is not whether Churchward was correct in every detail, but how well the idea of Mu explains the impossible similarities. Identical building methods appearing oceans apart no longer seem like chance if we imagine a shared origin. The exactness of Puma Punku, the many-sided masonry of Peru and Easter Island, the megaliths of Baalbek, the forgotten walls of Montana. All could be outposts of a mother civilization whose heartland lies now beneath the Pacific waves. Stand on Easter Island and gaze across the horizon, and the idea of Mu feels less like fantasy and more like memory. The Moai statues with their serious faces look inland as if their true gaze was once toward a homeland that has since disappeared beneath the sea. Legends say the statues walk to their places, echoing memories of lost methods of moving. Perhaps they are not only guards of the island, but mourners for a vanished continent. If Mu existed, then the megaliths we see today are not the beginnings of civilization, but its remains. They are pieces of a global building style, echoes of a people who learned to command stone with knowledge we have forgotten. And if their end came in fire and flood, it may explain why myths across the world remember destruction so clearly. Why silence falls where explanation should be. Why history seems to begin not at the start, but in the middle of a story already happening. From the vision of Mu, the mind turns to the knowledge itself. What if the methods of this lost world, its ways of shaping, moving, and energizing stone, were not myths, but realities? If so, then the megaliths are not only ruins, but textbooks, their lessons locked in granite. To approach them is to approach the edge of forgotten science, erased legacies waiting to be remembered. If the megaliths are the surviving pieces of a forgotten global civilization, then what has been lost is not only their monuments, but their knowledge. Across the world, the stones hint at methods and technologies that seem out of place, ways of working with matter that leave no explanation in the archaeological record. The silence of history may not be accidental. It may be the shadow of something erased. At Puma Punku, drill holes sliced cleanly through blocks of andesite, their walls smooth and even as if made by spinning tools centuries ahead of their time. At Ollantay Tambo, long straight cuts appear on granite faces as though saws had once passed through stone harder than steel. At Sacsayhuamán, scoop marks suggest the rock itself was once softened, carved like clay before hardening again. Legends from the Andes recall plants whose juices could dissolve stone, while Egyptian myths whisper of priests who could make blocks float through the air. Could such stories preserve twisted memories of real methods? Was stone once not broken but changed? Some researchers point to evidence of vitrification. Stone surfaces melted by intense heat, then cooled into glass-like finishes. Others propose geopolymer processes, early forms of concrete poured into molds to create blocks of impossible exactness. And still others guess about acoustic or magnetic ways, technologies that harness the natural forces of earth and vibration to lift and line up massive stones. If so, then these were not miracles, but sciences lost in the great break of history. Catastrophe may have destroyed the civilizations that held this knowledge, but it may also have destroyed the continuity of memory. What remained were pieces, walls too lasting to collapse, myths too powerful to forget, whispers too deep to silence. The erasure may not have been only natural. Some traditions suggest knowledge was purposefully withheld, guarded, or hidden. In Mesoamerican lore, the gods punished humanity with flood to erase pride. In Greek myth, fire was stolen from the gods and then restricted. In secret traditions, knowledge is described as dangerous, to be hidden until humanity is ready. Could the silence around the megaliths be purposeful? A deliberate forgetting rather than mere loss. Yet even erased legacies leave fingerprints. The many-sided fitting of stone, the repeating knobs, the massive abandoned blocks. These are signatures of a tradition too steady to be chance. They suggest that the builders spoke the same language of geometry and matter, no matter where they were on Earth. Perhaps they did not think of stone as lifeless, but as alive, responsive to forces we no longer control. Perhaps they saw energy not as resource, but as partner shaping their world in harmony with unseen patterns. Stand among these monuments, and you sense an intelligence woven into their very presence. They are not only buildings, they are messages. Each wall whispers of knowledge that once existed, knowledge that may yet be recoverable if we learn to listen differently. In the silence of stone lies the possibility that history is not simply what we remember, but also what we were meant to forget. From here the path leads us toward the final reflection. If megaliths are the voices of a forgotten civilization, then perhaps they are still speaking, not in words, but in lasting, in exactness, in mystery. To listen is to accept that history is not closed, that the stones themselves are portals into another way of knowing, another way of being. And so we arrive at the final part of our journey. To stand before these monuments is not only to look backward, but to glimpse a possibility that civilizations rise and fall, but the stones remain, whispering to those who dare to hear. They lie scattered across the earth, silent yet unyielding, pieces of a chorus that has never stopped singing. The megaliths do not shout their message. They whisper it in the tightness of their joints, in the hugeness of their mass, in the silence where history should have spoken. They invite us not to look for answers written in ink, but to listen for truths written in stone. Stand at Baalbek as twilight falls, and you feel the gravity of the trilithon pressing into the earth. Walk the shattered plain of Puma Punku, and the exactness of abandoned blocks, murmurs of unfinished dreams. Touch the basalt at Vinapu on Easter Island, and the stones seem to echo voices carried across the Pacific. In Montana, Siberia, Peru, Egypt, wherever these walls rise, the chorus is the same. We were here, we knew, and we lasted. Perhaps the stones are not merely ruins, but messages left for the future. Survivors of a catastrophe might have known that texts can burn, myths can twist, memories can fade, but stone lasts. To carve knowledge into the bones of the earth is to trust that one day someone will listen. We are those listeners now. What do the stones teach us? That civilization may not be a single straight line climbing upward, but a cycle of rise and fall, of remembering and forgetting. That knowledge once reached heights we can barely imagine, only to be broken by fire and flood. That our story is not as young as we think, but older, stranger, and far more fragile. Perhaps that is the true legacy of these walls. Not proof of an answer, but the persistence of a question. They remind us that silence is not emptiness, but potential. That history hides as much as it reveals. They remind us that what is forgotten is not necessarily lost, and so the stones remain, guardians of a memory we are only beginning to recover. They are not simply blocks of granite and limestone. They are voices from a forgotten world waiting for ears willing to hear. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the hum of these monuments beneath the earth. A low vibration reaching across continents, connecting walls, temples, and mountains in a single hidden song. Imagine that you are listening not to ruins, but to echoes of a civilization that proved long before us that humanity could shape the impossible. And if you find these stories haunting, if the voices of stone stir your imagination, consider joining us again. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time?